In this video, we're going to be talking about the pyramid framework, which is going to help you understand business metrics and how they relate to KPIs and OKRs, as well as what you actually need to know about them in order to land a job as a data analyst. So if you've ever wondered, what is a business metric really? How does it relate to KPIs and OKRs? How many of them do I actually need to know? And how do I speak about them so it sounds like I actually know what I'm talking about? Then this video is for you. We're going to be talking about one of the simplest mental models for understanding the landscape of metrics. Then I'm going to share a trick that enables you to apply domain knowledge of business metrics across industries. And then at the end, I'm going to share some practical next steps for improving your understanding of business metrics so that you can land a job as a data analyst. If you're new here, I'm Christine. I'm a former data director and a hiring manager who now helps people break into their first job in data by learning how to think, speak, and operate like the top 1% of analysts out there. Let's dive in. Now, these days, companies don't just want data analysts who know how to build reports and dashboards. They want data analysts who actually speak their language. And what that means is understanding their numbers, their goals, their stakeholders, and how this all ties back to what's available in the data, which is why many data analyst job descriptions these days say things like help measure and report key metrics or own and establish KPIs. And you might be wondering, isn't this the company's job? Don't they already know what numbers they actually want to track and how those numbers are doing? The thing is, companies have a lot of numbers. And so they actually need data analysts to make sense of what's going on in these values, help pull the most important numbers to the surface, and help see whether or not those numbers are performing well or badly. By the way, if you want to shortcut your understanding of business metrics and save about 20 hours of Googling, I have made a business metrics cheat sheet for you guys, which is going to show you the top metrics for popular data analyst industries, how to speak about them, what stakeholders actually care about them, and show you how to integrate these metrics into your projects. So make sure you download that below. And if your goal is to become a standout data analyst in 6 months or less, then you might want to check out my mentorship program, the Analytics Accelerator. I've just opened spots for the next 30-person cohort where we give you real-time feedback and tailored mentorship and guidance so that you can learn the business intuition, communication skills, and standout technical skills to land that data job this year. In order to do this, you need to understand the concept of the metrics pyramid. Now, metrics are everything that we can track. KPIs are the metrics that actually matter, and the OKRs are the change that we're trying to drive. Let's break this down a little bit. So metrics are literally anything that you can track. As long as it's a quantitative value, then it's a metric. So for example, just the other day, I was doing some analysis with my marketing lead on the performance of this YouTube channel. And the metrics that we could track are things like views, subscribers, number of likes, number of comments, the video length, average view duration, impressions, the number of people who watch me on 2 times speed because I'm talking too slowly. You get the idea. So at a company, metrics are the quantitative values that live in the data. And at this point, we're not yet deciding whether or not these metrics are actually relevant to the company performance or whether or not they're actually helpful to track. Some metrics are important and others aren't, and that actually brings us to the next layer. Now, the KPIs layer is where we start moving on to the metrics that we actually care about. It's where we start asking ourselves, okay, out of the bajillion metrics that we could track, what are the 3 to 5 that actually tell us if we're doing well or badly? So for example, going back to my YouTube situation, if I ask my marketing lead, can you do some analysis that helps us understand the overall performance of our videos, then he defined the KPIs to be average view duration, because this is a really big factor for how YouTube actually ranks your video, the click-through rate, because this tells us whether or not our thumbnails and titles are effective, and the number of new subscribers per video, because this of course tells us if whether or not you guys are interested in the videos that we're making. And just like that, the 100 metrics that we could have tracked then become just 3, the 3 that we actually care about. Most teams at work will actually really care about 5 to 10 KPIs maximum, because these are the metrics that are used to track performance. They're also often shared with the higher level leadership team. And oftentimes the leadership team has to sign off on each team's KPIs and agree, yes, this is what we're going to use to evaluate your team's performance. So a good rule of thumb is that if it seems like a leadership team really wouldn't care about this metric at all, then it's probably just a metric and not a KPI. So at the top of the pyramid, we have something called OKRs, or objective key results. And this is where leadership is usually setting the direction of the company, and OKRs are what makes that direction concrete. It's basically saying, here is where we want to be by this date. It's more big directional stuff. So OKRs for this channel might be something like, we want to hit 90K subscribers by December, or we want to increase course revenue by 30%, or decrease our churn by 5% by the end of this year. These aren't just numbers. They're actually signals about what matters the most right now. And usually at a company, there's maybe 3 to 5 main OKRs that get circulated across the entire company because they're the big top line priorities that leadership wants everyone to align themselves on. While metrics are the quantified values that live in the available data, the KPIs are the metrics that get surfaced in dashboards because they're the metrics that teams have decided to report their performance on. And OKRs usually live in town halls or all hands or leadership updates because of the big priorities that everyone should be aware about. So they're all metrics at the end of the day. KPIs and OKRs technically are all quantified values, but they're all at different levels of altitude and different levels of importance. So how does this actually impact how you should communicate on the job and in interviews? I typically find that more junior or new data analysts will live in the metrics layer. When they share their insights, they'll say things like the total page views was 47,000, or the average open rate across the quarter was about 20%, or that our bounce rate was 2.3%. And they'll just kind of stop at the actual metrics. Whereas someone who is more experienced and more advanced can tie the metrics to the KPIs and the OKRs. So they might say things like, our two main KPIs this quarter of conversion rate and AOV were both up about 18%. And this actually contributes most directly to our overall OKR of increasing revenue by 30% this quarter. So they'll kind of travel through the different layers of the pyramid. And this is exactly what impresses hiring managers as well as stakeholders on the actual job. Okay, so now you're probably thinking, cool, I get the pyramid, but how do I know what metrics I should actually focus on? Because every company seems so different. Now here's a cheat code that is going to make your life so much easier. It's the concept that most metric pyramids are similar within departments across industries. So what I mean by that is most companies, whether they're selling software, solar panels, or socks, usually will have their version of a marketing team, a finance team, a product team, an operations team. Even if they're named slightly different across different industries, the function that they serve is pretty much the same, which means that if you can understand the metrics pyramid within the marketing team in one industry, you've also largely understood marketing metrics in another industry. So with marketing, for example, if you're working at a tech startup or a SaaS business or a supply chain or logistics company, then the stuff that the marketing team cares about largely stays the same. For example, the metrics layer might have something like cost per click, the total number of page views, total traffic, session length, engagement, reach, impressions, whereas the KPIs might end up being something like customer acquisition cost or conversion rate or the total page views or traffic. And then the final OKRs would sound something like decrease CAC by 15% or increase the number of qualified leads by 20%. So you can see that the pyramid stays the same even if you're swapping out the product. Now, I used to feel pretty overwhelmed thinking about how do we as analysts help choose which metrics should become KPIs. And this is actually also an interview question that I once failed for an interview with Facebook when they asked me, out of all these metrics, which one do you think is most important to evaluate the health of the newsfeed? And over time, I realized that most companies are picking their KPIs on two main factors. Number one, can we actually influence this metric? And number two, does this metric genuinely reflect performance? So for example, for a marketing team, one of the metrics that you might have available to you is how long someone spends on the actual website. But if someone spends 20 minutes versus just 1 minute and still buys the product, does the time that that person spent on the website really matter? So ultimately, most teams will pick around 5 to 10 metrics to become their main KPIs. And yeah, KPIs can overlap between teams. So for example, the finance team and the sales team will probably both care about a metric like monthly recurring revenue. It actually makes a lot of sense because it means that you don't have your teams optimizing on different things. So once you realize that marketing metrics in fintech look very similar to marketing metrics in e-commerce, you stop feeling like you need to learn an entirely new language just to switch industries. You just need to learn the department pyramids once, and once you understand that, you can step into any marketing team and say, oh, what's the CAC currently, and what's the forecast for this quarter? And that immediately makes you sound like you've already worked there for months. So how do you start implementing metrics on your data journey so that you sound like an experienced analyst? Well, the first step is to know the top 10 metrics in your industry. And when I say know the metrics, what I mean by that is you should understand how the metric is calculated from a technical standpoint. So what is the actual formula for that metric? Then how do you speak about that metric in plain English or whatever language so that you can explain it to a non-technical stakeholder? And lastly, how does that metric actually relate to a different stakeholder team? Once you have a grasp of this, you're immediately going to sound like someone who's already worked in that industry compared to someone who's learning it for the first time. The second step is to choose data sets that actually map to real teams. So when you're picking data for your portfolio projects, always think about the metrics in this data set. What teams do they actually relate to? Is it a finance team? Is it a sales team, a product team, a marketing team, an operations team, or a team that's going to be specific to the industry that you're interested in working in? If you can't answer that question, then it points to the fact that it might might not be relevant to an actual company. The best kind of data sets usually feature metric categories that relate across domains. So revenue metrics, marketing metrics, customer metrics, usage metrics, and engagement metrics. If you want to learn more about how to find these data sets besides on Kaggle, then check out my portfolio playbook playlist here. Now, the third step is to define your KPIs up front. So in your portfolio projects and in speaking about metrics on the actual job, it's usually helpful to make sure that you're being really clear about what metrics you're focusing on. So you might actually say, for this analysis, the KPIs we decided to focus on are total sales, refunds, and average order value because it's tied to the overall team goal of raising revenue by 10%. This helps make sure that everyone is on the same page about what numbers matter, whether it's hiring managers or your stakeholders on the job. If you want to sound more experienced, then start studying things like investor decks, earnings reports, and earnings calls, where you can literally see how leaders in the industry talk about metrics, KPIs, and OKRs. So if this intro to business metrics was helpful, let me know in the comments below, as well as what industry you're targeting, because if enough people comment, then I will turn this business metrics idea into a metrics series, where I'm going to introduce the top 10 metrics across industries and give you even more deep dive frameworks for how to apply it in your job hunt and on the actual job. And if your goal is to become a standout data analyst in 6 months or less, then you might want to check out my mentorship program, the Analytics Accelerator. I've just opened spots for the next 30-person cohort, where we give you real-time feedback and tailored mentorship and guidance so that you can learn the business intuition, communication skills, and standout technical skills to land that data job this year. That's it for this video. I will see you guys in the next one.